Shalom Aleichem. Come on, you people. Shalom Aleichem. Thank you. I have this fetish about inclusion. They gave me what to read, what to say about Dr. Aronson and about Rabbi Epstein, and it turns out it's right in your program. So you also can read that, and I'll just say a few things in introduction. I'm not yet Dr. Aronson's best friend, but I'm going to be. You heard his academic, demographic, kind of social numbers person. When you read his book, you'll also discover the guy who thinks through a thing, who asks a question and talks about it some more, and talks about it a different way, and then somehow or other gets back to the question, and you understand it better. I'm getting him to autograph this. Greg Epstein is a great person to be in class with, because somebody will say something, and he will also come at it from a completely different angle and ask a really incisive question, and the best thing is that he'll argue with you without getting mad at you. I like that. The big secret is he also has an extremely beautiful singing voice. They didn't put that in your program. You heard this morning some specifics about who we are. And now we get to the real question, which is, how should we live? And that's the question that Dr. Aronson and Rabbi Epstein are going to talk about. Who's going first?
Yes, the book does exist. I became a humanist rabbi thinking that I would never work for the man, but I in fact do work for the man now. I work for a major global multinational corporation publisher that does not release products early, so I apologize, but I brought my copy here, and I want to think about some of the issues that I've written about in it with you. I want to start, though, with a response to a comment that Jacques made that we're not so big, right? And of course, we all know the saying, don't make yourself so small, you're not that big. Right? We're not so big. We shouldn't just go trying to open up a can of whoop-ass on the rest of the religious country, right? It's a great saying. I would venture to say that we should not be thinking about opening up a can of whoop-ass on the rest of the country, whether or not we have 60 million. I just don't really believe in cans of whoop-ass. But I'm here to talk about what I do believe, not what I don't believe. And I've got the biggest number of all on my book cover. It says here, good without God, what a billion non-religious people do believe. A billion. So I'm making the most hubristic claim of all, I suppose. But am I really suggesting that we have a billion people in our camp ready to march on order for whatever it would be that we'd want to march them on? What I am suggesting is that rather than opening up cans of anything, whoop-ass or otherwise, I'd like to see us open up in the coming months and years a book, not just this book, of what we do believe. We have this conversation again and again about how many people there are who don't believe. And my question is, how are we supposed to get anywhere in that conversation if we never turn the page to how many people there are who do believe in humanism? So, call the book Good Without God, and a frequent response to that title that I get is, thank you. We've been needing this, we really needed a book on why we can be good without God. So thank you for writing that. And I say thank you, but no thank you. It's not what the book is about. It's not a book about whether we can be good without God. Because if you think we can't be good without God, whatever the numbers, 60 million, 2 million, 2, it's not just your opinion. It's not a mere curious musing, a brainstorm that you've creatively thought up. That's prejudice. And it might even be discrimination. Because we don't ask the question, regardless of numbers. Oh, you're a Catholic. Oh, how interesting. Well, tell me a little bit. Can you be a decent human being and a Catholic? Just wondering. We don't ask, oh, I see, you're Muslim. That's wonderful. Tell me, how is it that you're able to be a functioning person and a Muslim? I'm just wondering. Right? So we don't ask these questions of, how are you able to be a good human being and a Democrat or a Republican? Or, at least we don't usually ask those questions. And this is a question, whether we can be good without God, that doesn't need to be answered. It needs to be rejected outright. It needs to be put to bed. But that doesn't mean that being a good person is an easy thing to do, with or without God. Life is hard. We can become sick, or we can get injured. We can lose our loved ones, have our hearts broken at any given moment. And it's hard. And there are no easy answers. I mean, we titled this session Compassion, Purpose, Compassion, and Community, right? And so, of course, in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you all the answers for purpose, compassion, and community, right? Then we'll move on. Actually, in my 21st minute, I'll solve global warming. But we need to open up a conversation about what we do believe. We need to open up a conversation about humanism. Now, most of us in this room are familiar with that formal definition of humanism, a progressive life stance that without supernaturalism, without anything supernatural or magical, affirms our ability and our responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment, aspiring to the greater good of humanity. Okay, 25 words. But really, in short, humanism is being good without God. As long as we remember that the emphasis of humanism is not on the without God. That's part of it. But the emphasis of humanism is on the good. It's on being good, doing good, living well for our own sake, for the sake of the ones that we love, for the sake of all of humanity and for the sake of the natural world, which surrounds us and sustains us and is in danger. This is what we believe. You know, talk about good. And again, we have to come back to this question. Do we really think that there are a billion people out there of any persuasion who are really good all the time, who should feel comfortable carrying a flag that says, I am a good person, I'm on the side of good? I had a student, a Harvard student who's really thoughtful young man who knows he's not religious, he knows he's an atheist, he's interested in Buddhism, he's interested in humanism, but he's really not sure whether he wants to get involved in much of anything. He's sort of looking around Harvard for the community that he can call home, looking around for who's a good person. He got to Harvard, was the first member of his family to be able to go on to that level of education. And he got there and he said, is this all there is? This is the level of people that are here? I'm looking for something more. And he asked me, you really think that a billion people are good without God? I believe you that they're without God. But are they really good? And the truth is that, as a colleague of mine, Professor Peter Gomes at Harvard, once said to, I can't remember whether it was Colbert or Jon Stewart, they asked him, why did you call your book, Professor Gomes, why did you call your book the Scandalous Gospel of Jesus? And he said, well, because they told me it would sell books if I called it that. And if we wanted a more accurate title than Good Without God, we might choose something more along the lines of Good and Bad with or without God. Right? That's what you really have, right? But point is, it's not a book about bad with God. And I don't think that's what we need to be talking about. We need to acknowledge that you can be good with God. That if you are good with God, we're not against you. I'm not against you. And then we need to start asking the questions that are really much more important than whether we can be good without God. The questions of why, how, and with whom. The question why, right? Purpose. What is our purpose? One of the folks that I really had a great time reading in researching this book, and it really was research, because it's not just reading the book, it's reading multiple books by this individual and coming to appreciate the voice of somebody with whom I disagree profoundly, and someone that one often hears made fun of at conferences like this. Not just the idea that there are 35 million of Rick Warren's bigots. But there was a recent atheist conference in which the comedian Bill Maher, I'm told, opened up a copy of the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and started reading from it, and comedian style, eliciting chuckles, right? Oh, check this out. The Purpose-Driven Life. Well, The Purpose-Driven Life is a book by the megachurch pastor Rick Warren that on its cover sort of invites a little bit of ridicule, perhaps, in the sense that it says, this is the best-selling hardcover nonfiction work of all time. Which raises the question, right? Does that mean the Bible's fiction? Soft cover too, right? So we often don't open it and get past that. But why would it sell that many copies? Or maybe it's moved down on the Amazon rankings. But the book argues that it's not all about you. It's the first line, right? That the answer to your problems is to stop thinking of them as exclusively your problems. That's the first bit of trouble we run into, is why me? Well, as if there were answers. That's the humanist response, by the way. Why me? Why me? Why me? You expect an answer? But Rick Warren's version of this is to say, look, you have to live for a purpose beyond just yourself. We have to live for something greater than ourselves, or we are doomed to the loneliness that is living for ourselves alone. And it's actually a wonderful and compelling message in many ways, except when he gets to a little point about how, oh, by the way, the only purpose that you should be living for, the only purpose worth living for, the only purpose that's acceptable is the Jesus Christ purpose. And that if you're not living for Jesus Christ's purpose, and we mean a literal interpretation of Jesus Christ as the man who rose from the dead, as God's, then you are doomed to hell for all eternity. To burn. Well, with that I disagree. But we very rarely go beyond that to say, what are the purposes that we ought to be living for? And it reminds me of a story, colleague of mine, a Harvard chaplain, a conservative Presbyterian with a real Southern accent, came up to me one day, and he said, we were actually having a breakfast meeting, and he said, Greg, how's it feel to be a chaplain for the largest denomination in the world? How's that feel? That must be great. And at first I was really perplexed, but this is how a conservative Presbyterian can often think, right? Because he is looking for true believers in Jesus Christ, and he doesn't see very many. What he does see are the uncommitted. He sees a lot of what Rick Warren sees. Did you know that Rick Warren's church, Saddleback, which I visited with some members of the Orange County community just a few months ago? We had a great time there. I had a wonderful time there, actually. No, I really did. I didn't meet Warren himself, but I was impressed by, they're warm, they're welcoming. The place is very simple. It's very environmentally friendly. They have posters all over the wall about the environmental projects and the community service projects they're working on. They don't emphasize the part about us burning in hell. They emphasize that they only recruit to unbelievers, as they call us. And you know, if you're a committed Christian already, you're encouraged to go down the block to a different church. Now, what I think Bradley, my colleague at Harvard, was referring to is the fact that most of us really, what we see on a day-to-day level as the purposes that people around us are striving for are not religious purposes or humanist purposes. They're purposes like striving. More stuff, more money, more cars, more sex, more drugs. Well, drugs maybe 20, 30 years ago. Now it's, at least where I am, it's higher grades. But that's okay. I mean, that's a striving too, right? I mean, that's also a form of idolatry. It's the one I see most often. Drugs would be maybe painkillers, the ones that I see, right? Or you know, drugs that'll help you stay up longer to get higher grades. That's what I see at Harvard. But we get so frustrated with all the striving that we encourage ourselves to do and do and do and do and do. We run and run and run and run. Run, right? That we then say, I got to turn this off. I've got to turn the page entirely. We say, I've got to eliminate all striving. I've got to get this out of my life. And so Buddhism and the East becomes so appealing, right? The idea that, oh, tell me how I can eliminate all the sense that I have to strive for something, that I can just eliminate desire. This is what happened with me. I mean, I thought that, the monotheistic religions were of no interest to me, but I went all the way to China and studied Chinese in the original, so I could study the Buddhist texts in the original, because I just wanted to get rid of this, move on, right? Move on to a life where I didn't have to strive. Well, good luck with that. Striving is part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. So the question is, what are we striving for? And this is something that Sherwin Wine taught me. He had an answer to that question, and the answer wasn't happiness, because if we're striving for happiness, we know we're never going to be happy all the time, right? So happy. Well, good luck with that, too, if that's your goal, day in and day out, right? Tony Kushner said, I've never met anybody who's truly happy. The best you can do is happy-ish. But, happy-ish is pretty good if it's combined with what Sherwin Wine called dignity, a sense of dignity. Now, dignity is a concept that Sherwin Wine defined very technically, and I won't get into that. It's in the book. But the idea is, essentially, that, as Hillel said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not, now when? This is, to me, a value that humanists share with a wide range of religious folks, and that we need to emphasize again and again and again, because that's what religious congregations do. They emphasize, in the best sense, when they're at their best, they are emphasizing the values that we need to remember over and over again. So we need to remember this. The how, the sense of the humanist ethics that we won't have time to get into, but I do a little thing with the Ten Commandments in the book, where I go through the Ten Commandments and you read them, and then you need to translate them, because thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord, am thy God, am a jealous God. Translation: don't make or worship any idols or any images of God. But the humanist version: pursue truth and honesty in all you do, and be wary of allowing power, status, or possessions to substitute for moral courage, dignity, and goodness. Now, that's something we need to talk more about. And this idea of the golden rule, right? The idea that if we stand on one foot and talk about doing unto others, or better yet, the Jewish version, don't do unto others what is hateful to you. It's really the idea, and we find it in all religions, and never once does it mention God. I mean, literally, we can go through, I do, we go through, each different religion has a version of the golden rule. None of them mentions God. They don't come from religion, we know this. They come from the fact that if we didn't have golden rules, we would have killed each other long, long ago. But it's really the idea that we don't get a second chance. And humanism emphasizes the golden rule. It makes the golden rule all the more urgent, right? We know that the way that we treated our spouse this morning, the way that we keep in touch with our friends, the way that we care for the earth is all we are. And that when we go to sleep at night, if we can do it without artificial enhancement, all we really have to hold on to is who we are, is what we've done. And that if actions really count, if every moment really counts, the urgency is, to use a religious word, awesome. Really awesome. The responsibility. We don't have a lot of time, and we'll talk about community. I think Ron is actually going to talk about community because he and I were talking yesterday, and I think that You've talked about how, this is not something that necessarily that you wrote a lot about in the Living Without God book, but that it's been sort of coming up again and again as you've been touring around talking about it. And I work every day building a community. This is what I do at Harvard. We build a community. It's not me preaching to them about how we should do it. My students would run away like Roadrunner from Coyote if I told them, this is how we have to build our community. This is what you have to do. But we're building it day in and day out. And the response is wonderful. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming out to participate in humanist community. Young people, young leaders at a university like Harvard, and now I'm starting to see, as I'm getting invited to go speak to other schools, hundreds of young people getting involved in humanism around the country. And I think that what it is really that we are starting to build something. We're starting to do more than just talk about being bad with God. We're talking about being good without. And to me, the idea of community, it's so necessary. It comes from my sense from my father that we really don't have a do-over on that issue either. My father, not a religious man, secular Jewish background, same as myself, I think strove for so many things that he wanted to stop all the striving, and he studied Eastern religion, mysticism, Buddhism, Taoism. I took the books off of his shelf after he had long since stopped reading them. But left behind the two communities, he had a mysterious illness along with his cancer that it took finally a sort of a Dr. House-like determination for me to discover what was this rare illness that he had. You may not have heard of it, but it was that he had trouble communicating about his emotions. Probably never heard of a man that had that, right? But it's... And so he had trouble latching on to community, right? If he had stuck with the Jewish community, well, then maybe there would have been a structure there. If he'd stuck with the community of Buddhists and New Age practitioners that he had then latched onto, maybe there would have been a community. But as it was, he got to his 50s, and the Jehovah's Witnesses would knock on the door, and he would let them in because they were offering community. And now, for the first time, I'm finally seeing humanists begin to offer that community as well. I'm starting to see with the United Coalition of Reason this effort to bring together all the various disparate groups in the country, the humanist groups and the atheist groups and the non-religious groups who have so many of the same values in common, but we don't work together, we don't know one another. And so now we're sort of putting the word out there. We're saying, look, here we are. And I think we will begin to see millions of people wake up to the idea that maybe there's something out there, but what are we going to have to offer them? It's not the place for me to offer all the answers. I've written about them. I've talked about many of the answers in serious detail here, but I think we need to do the work. We really need to keep in mind that I've talked about two great Jewish sayings. The last one is, Lo alecha hamelacha ligmor, v'lo ata ben chorin li batel mimena. That you're not required to finish the work of building a community, of knowing who you are, of knowing what your values are. None of us have all the answers, not myself, not any of us, but we're neither free to desist from it. And so what I want to leave you with then is not the without God, but the good. Let's go out and build something good together, something that unites us, something that allows us to reach out to one another and talk and experience what it means to be in community. Because otherwise, they're going to open up a can of whoop-ass on us. Anyway, thank you.